Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. For today's video, I have a special breakdown going over the long-term cycles of Bitcoin. Over the last 10 years, Bitcoin has perfectly followed 4-year cycles over each one of our bull and bear markets. Inside of our bear markets, we've seen 1-year downtrends, almost exactly 365 days on the dot. And then inside of our bull markets, they've been 3 years up. So 3 years up, 1 year down. Anybody that understands this method has been able to print money inside the crypto markets. But for today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means with the institutions now investing into crypto, with BlackRock, with so much strength in the market. Are we going to continue to see these same normal 4-year cycles, or are we going to end up seeing a lot of different things this cycle that catch a lot of people off guard? Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video, and we are going to be analyzing the long-term graph of Bitcoin, looking at the 4-year cycle trend, because I think that this is the most valuable bit of information that one could possibly know when it comes time to taking profits and when it also comes time to buying back into the markets. I've been able to amass a life-changing amount of wealth for myself. I've been able to help my family. I've been able to help my friends, and I know I've helped a lot of people just on YouTube as well. So when it comes time to talking about these cycles, there's nothing more valuable, in my opinion, than understanding this. Now, if we come all the way over here and we start analyzing our cycles, basically the way you analyze a 4-year cycle is from peak low of the bear market to peak low of the bear market, because it's at the very peak low of that cycle that the uptrend actually starts. And it's at the very peak low of the following downtrend and following bear market where that actually ends, because that's where the next one starts in its place. So when we're talking about these, if we analyze the time frames between cycle low to cycle low of each cycle, you're going to find a really interesting pattern where this is 1,428 days. Now, how many days are inside of 4 years? It's 1,450. So we can see that we were almost perfectly at that 4-year threshold. We were only about a month difference. And this is why the 4-year cycle is so powerful. What we see is from peak low to peak low, we have 4 years. Now, what we also end up seeing is from peak low to the all-time high of the cycle top, it's about 3 years in duration. So notice 1,064 days, that's almost perfectly 3 years from our cycle low. And then at our cycle top, we start our bear markets, and what we end up seeing are 1-year declines on the way back down. And this is the most interesting thing about the 4-year cycle, is basically since the last 10 years, we've perfectly synced up to these time frames. They might vary to some extent, the price action might differ, and that's why I always tell you guys focus on the time frames, because the price is bound to be different. Every cycle is going to be a little bit different. The price is bound to be different because there's fundamental factors that drive price that are different. For example, the COVID, capitulation that we saw, that was a huge black swan event. Those are sort of things you can't necessarily predict with extreme accuracy. Now, what we end up seeing is even inside of our bear market of this 2014 and 15 cycle, we saw this one was about 413 days. So it wasn't perfectly 1 year, right? This one was 364. It wasn't perfectly 1 year, but it was close enough that you start to see the same similarities developing. Now, we can also draw the same conclusions, right, going into the bear market bottom that we just saw. Notice, if we're analyzing from peak low to peak low, then theoretically, the peak low that we just experienced over here at the end of the year 2022 should be exactly 4 years from the peak low that we saw in 2018, assuming, this pattern holds true. So if we come over here, we draw another, date tool, we're going to see that this is 1,442 approximately, depending on where you draw it. If you draw it at the very breakdown of the FTX collapse, you're going to end up seeing it being exactly 1,428 days, which is exactly the same amount of time that we ended up seeing the last cycle, right? So this is why we understand the 4-year cycles. By understanding the 4-year cycles, it gives us a strategic advantage over the rest of the market, because by understanding the time frames, although the price might differ, although the price action is going to be different inside of a bull market or a bear market, just like they've always been a little bit different, by understanding the time frames, that's the one thing that stayed constant over each one of the last cycles over the 10 years, right? So even in this cycle, going into 2014, the bear market was exactly 1 year, well, almost exactly 1 year. Then the bull market was almost exactly 3 years. That led us into our next bear market, which was 364 days. Now, if we're analyzing the bear market that we just went through, from peak high to the low that we saw, it was almost exactly the same time frame, 364 days. So once again, guys, every cycle has been pretty much the same sort of consolidation. We see the 3 years up inside of the bull market. leading into a cycle top. The last two cycles were the exact same time frames all the way through. The bull market was 1,064 days to the cycle top. The bear market was 364 days to the cycle bottom. Both of those last two cycles played out in the exact same way. So now the question comes, we began a new 4-year cycle when we bottomed over here at the end of the year, because it was exactly 4 years from the one that we saw in 2018. So every 4 years we make a new cycle low. Now, what we're looking for in this cycle is wondering, is this going to continue to follow the same trend, or are we going to end up seeing a difference in structure? Now, the only thing that you need to really know when it comes time for how this cycle may differ is understanding left and right translations. Because in a 4-year cycle, we can have a right translation, or in a 4-year cycle, we can have a left translation. And I'm going to explain exactly what that means. So inside of a 4-year cycle, the uptrends are 3 years, the downtrends are 1 year. That's what we've seen historically. Now, if we actually go and analyze the halfway point between the 4-year cycle, so from peak low to peak low, it equals 4 years. If we analyze the halfway point, which is like, 714, 721 days, somewhere right around that level, we draw another line. And we're going to make this line yellow so that we can see it a little bit better. So notice right here, this is going to be our midway cycle point. If what we're looking at here is a cycle top always taking place on the right side of the mid-range point, because remember, we're analyzing a full cycle from peak low of the bear market to peak low of the bear market. So the middle point is just the halfway of the 4-year cycle. It's just 2 years, right? So you draw a halfway point at the 2-year mark, and whatever side the price of the cycle tops at of the midway point, that gives you a left or right translation. Notice how this topped on the right side of the mid-range. That's a right translation. If the market would have topped, over here and then started declining on the left side of this mid-range point, then that would have been a left translated cycle. So what we have seen historically speaking is every one of our cycles has topped on the right side. It's been a right translated cycle. It's basically like a confirmation that the next 4-year cycle is going to play out in a similar way. So anytime we actually have one of these right translated cycles, it actually means that we're going to end up most likely following another 4-year cycle. So it just gives us confirmation that, hey, we topped on the right side. Most likely we're going to continue to follow the same trend that we've been at. And we can see that that's been the case every single time. If we draw another point from the mid-range point in our last 4-year cycle, coming over here 721 days approximately, we draw that line right there. We're going to see that once again, even though Bitcoin didn't make quite as parabolic of a move in 2017, it still topped on the right side of the mid-range point. And it topped both sides, right? Even the peak that we saw right over here at 65K, even though we barely made another new all-time high past that, both of those were still on the right side of that trend. So what that told us is most likely we're going to have another 4-year cycle. So to see us bottom perfectly 4 years from the last cycle bottom in 2018, which was also 4 years from the last cycle bottom in 2015, right? We've also followed these same sort of similarities, and nothing is really different up to this point. The question now comes, is this cycle that we've been in for, the last little over a year now, we've been in this new cycle for 462 days approximately. We're about a couple months short of that new Bitcoin halving. Historically speaking, when we're looking at the time frames of Bitcoin, it's always taken Bitcoin around 11 to 1200 days before we've gone into a new all-time high. The cycle in 2013 at the cycle top till the point of us making a new all-time high was actually a little over 1200 days. The cycle in 2018, before we ended up making a new all-time high, was about just under 1100 days, 1099 days. And if we're looking at our current cycle from where we're at today, we're sitting at 826 days. So if we're going to end up seeing a normal 4-year cycle, I think that we do need to see Bitcoin kind of correct in here. It might run up here a little bit higher to maybe 59K, but I want to see Bitcoin end up correcting, doing a little consolidation before we make that new all-time high. Considering the reason why 2017 was such a profitable cycle was because we had spent all of this time consolidating on this ascending support, right? We spent all of that time building an ascending support all the way to those all-time highs, and then once we got the move into a new all-time high, because we spent all of that time building, new buyers, long-term holders were coming into the market, building a solid area of support, it gave us that foundation to be able to have such a big parabolic rally. In our last cycle, it was a lot more volatile. We were inside of this big triangle type consolidation, and so the breakout, was pretty quick, and then it also ended up, not being very sustainable, considering most of that was because of FTX and all of the over-leveraged people that got washed out in the bear market. So we never really ended up seeing that normal cycle play out in the same ways of 2017. Our current cycle has been much more consistent with what we saw in that 2017 cycle, where we kind of built this first area of support. We've been building this new sort of ascending support. And I want to see the market come back down and kind of retest back down, get back down towards that 40, maybe just sub 40K level before we retest this main trend line that we've been consolidating on to basically begin this new cycle. Retest it one more time before we end up getting that new all-time high. Because what I want to end up seeing Bitcoin do is another right translated cycle. I want to see Bitcoin top on the right side of this trend. So if we're looking at this being another normal 4-year cycle, then we're analyzing peak low to peak low. So our peak low in the beginning of this new 4-year cycle happened at the end of the year 2022. So we'd go another 4 years from that point. 1,450 days is technically 4 years. We're going to draw another point. We're going to make this one white. This is our 4-year cycle time frame right here. We're inside of this new sort of area. Now, we're only a little over a year, approaching a year and a half inside of this new uptrend. We still have another year and a half, a little over that to go in the cycle. What we want to see is us build solid foundations of support like what we did in 2017, because the likelihood of us making a much more sustainable parabolic move, maybe Bitcoin hitting that 200, 250K, maybe even more than that, who knows? With the ETF approval, we have institutional backing, and we've never had that in the prior cycles. Bitcoin has shown such strength up to this point that it's kind of hard to say what is going to happen. If Bitcoin were to start running into a new all-time high right now and kind of just, leave this main trend line and never end up coming back down for a correction, I do believe that that leads us to a little bit of a difference inside of this cycle. Because remember, when we're analyzing the midway point, we're going to go 720, 30 days approximately. We're going to make this one yellow. If we see Bitcoin running into a new all-time high, front running prior cycles, hitting that 100, 150, maybe 200K level before we've ever even hit the mid-range point of our cycle time frame of the 4-year cycle, I do believe that this will be the first time where we end up seeing the cycle top happen on the left side. The left side. Because notice, each of the last cycles, the cycle top has happened on the right side at the mid-range. Right side at the mid-range. If this one front runs and shows even more strength like what we've seen up to this point, it would be the first time that we've gone into this massive new all-time high much quicker than any of the prior cycles. And I do think that that could lead to a cycle top, early into a bull run rather than us ending up following a normal 3 years up, 1 year down. It would end up being, about a year and a half, a year up, and then we would start a longer bear market all the way back down, right? Because what we're looking at here is our 4-year cycle bottom is going to end up being sometime over in, the end of the year 2026. So if we have a shortened cycle where we end up just front running everything, the media blows this thing out of proportion, everything just absolutely sends it like crazy, maybe similar to what we saw right here, but even quicker in pace, then at that point we would be looking at this long-term correction all the way back down, and it would be, instead of a 1-year bear market, you'd be looking at something like 720 days, like a 2-year bear market, right? Maybe a 1.5 to a 2-year bear market all the way back down. And that would end up being more of a blow off top type of scenario. What we want to see Bitcoin do is build an area of support going into this next cycle, right? Well, let's leave this one. We want to see Bitcoin kind of build this new area of support before topping, all the way over at the end of the year 2025. That would show a right translated cycle in the same ways all of our normal ones have played out, and the likelihood of us following another normal 4-year cycle is just much higher than anything else. This would give us the most profit, even though we'd have to go through more corrective phases, even though it would take more periods of us, building a foundation of support on this main trend line. This is the most bullish scenario because it would give us the most consistent area of support since all the way back in that 2016-2017 cycle. The reason why our last cycle was much more shortened was because we had a pandemic and then we had a lot of over leveraged players kind of manipulating the market, being FTX, being Terra Luna, being all of these, Celsius and all of these other centralized lenders. I do believe that this cycle, if we're going to see a normal 4-year cycle, it will be the most profitable one of all time. I've talked a lot about the super cycle. I've talked a lot about why I believe that this altcoin cycle is going to be much bigger in comparison to anything else. And it's because inside of crypto, we follow these cycle timeframes so, accurately. I've never found anything in crypto that makes me more money than understanding the 4-year cycles. We followed a normal 4-year cycle just like we have in all of years past. And maybe I didn't do the greatest job of being able to explain this in all details, but at the end of the day, anybody that understands these 4-year cycles is going to set themselves up to make a lot more money, because it's understanding this that gives you kind of the blueprint for, hey, now I know when to get in and out of these cycles. Now I know when to take profits. Now I know when to actually position my stakes for when they're going to unlock following these cycles, because in my opinion, that's where you make the most money. Most people don't understand cycles. Most people don't understand how to trade these sort of things. They don't know that Bitcoin follows these time frames. And then even if they're presented with evidence showing this like this, they'll still be ignorant and say, well, it's bound to not follow it forever. But by understanding that it isn't going to follow it forever, we understand that we'll just end up having a shortened left translated cycle in a 4-year cycle, or we'll have a normal right translated cycle. It doesn't change anything considering Bitcoin still bottomed exactly 4 years from the last bottom. That shows that we're still following a 4-year cycle. We still have to give it the same amount of respect as everything else in the market, but we have to give this more respect than anything else, because there's literally no indicator that works better than Bitcoin 4-year cycle timeframes. There's nothing that's easier. Anybody can do this with any free charting software. It doesn't take, you paying money to do this. And the most money I make in the cycles comes down to me just following the easiest sort of setups. I don't overcomplicate things. I'm investing at the cycle lows around those 4-year cycle timeframes. I'm taking profits when we're out, around that end of the year 2025 mark, 3 years up from our cycle. Because if we're going to follow a normal 4-year cycle, we're going to end up looking at a cycle top sometime at the end of the year 2025, right? Looking at 1,064, 1,000 to 1,100 days approximately before that cycle top. That would be a normal 4-year cycle. That would lead us into another sort of 1-year bear market decline into the end of the year 2025, right? Into the end of the year 2026. That's what we would be looking at for Bitcoin over in here inside of our next cycle. And that's the thing I think we're and I think that this is going to give us the most strategic advantage over the rest of the market. By understanding how Bitcoin follows and syncs up to these time frames, there's nothing that's going to give you a better signal for taking profits. There's nothing that's going to give you a better signal for exiting the market as well. And I think that the most important thing to take away from this video, ignoring the prior cycles and focusing on what's ahead for this one, if we end up seeing Bitcoin start breaking out and going into a new all-time high over the next couple months rather than correcting, then I do believe that that could be us pinpointing towards a left translated cycle. If we see Bitcoin running into a new all-time high, we're already sitting at $100,000+, maybe summer to even closer towards the end of this year, 2024. At that point, we got to be a little bit skeptical about this thing actually being a left translation. But if we take time sort of consolidating, building an area of support as we're just growing here, before that new all-time high type of move sets in, similar to what we saw in that 2017 bull run, I think that that's really where we're going to see the best sort of situation for us to make long-term profit play out. And it would be very consistent, in the same ways that it has been up to this point. We've seen a lot of those same similarities in market structure. It's just that this cycle maybe hasn't had quite as many 30-40% corrections, which is why I say we've seen more strength this cycle than what we even saw in 2017. The fact that there's been almost no corrections, the corrections have been bought up very quickly, and now with the ETF approval and billions of dollars coming into that, we've already seen the narrative come into focus that this could be the left translated cycle, where this does end up front running prior cycles, because it already has been. If we're already going to be making a new all-time high over the next couple months, that's already significantly quicker than this cycle here. It's going to be significantly quicker than the cycle of 2015 all the way to 2017, and that will, in my opinion, be a big red flag towards us actually having an early cycle top and a longer bear market to follow. So I just want to keep you guys prepared, be aware, understanding these things, because I can guarantee you by understanding understanding this, you're going to be better prepared than anybody in the market. You're going to know when to take profits. You're going to know when to get back in the market. So I wanted to break things down. If you found value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps me out, helps out the channel to get more views. You know, at the end of the day, I'm a YouTuber. You know, I need your guys' attention and I need your guys' views. Otherwise, I'm a sad, depressed man. Not really, but I do appreciate the support because I think that this helps a lot of people. I have a lot of people that reach out to me and say, you know, just thank me for making these videos, talking about different cryptos, talking about the cycles, because I really genuinely believe that anybody can follow this. And the average person, you know, like me, that doesn't know how to do basic math, couldn't graduate math class. I literally haven't passed a math class since 8th grade. I didn't graduate high school. Like, I did a lot of drugs when I was young. I'm not anybody that's special at all, yet by understanding some of the most basic things in crypto, I know that anybody can make a lot of money doing this, and that's why I try and make these videos, is to help everybody do the same things I've done for myself by being early to these cycles, by understanding when to get in and out. That's how you compound your wealth. That's how you grow your personal wealth long term, and that's my ultimate goal with this channel, is to help you guys do the same things I've ultimately been able to do for myself. So thank you once again for watching this video. If you guys want to see how I invest over the course of these cycles, you can always sign up for my website, linked below. On my website, you'll get private access to my group. On that, you're going to see all the trades, anything I'm doing with my money long term. Even when I take profits on crypto and I invest in other markets, you're going to be able to follow along with all of it. So if you do want to check it out, links are in the description. Thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.